Here at A-Corp Media, we offer a place where we can civilly discuss all things political, from national issues to local elections. This is In the Arena. We're pleased to welcome Missouri State Senator Jason Bean to In the Arena. Welcome.
Absolutely, great to be here again.
All right. Yeah, you've been here a couple of times here in our studio with Barry on Barry Interesting. You were here once as a candidate for state senate.
Correct.
And then once again right after the election, after you were the senator-elect. So
yes.
We wanted to have you back so we could have a little conversation with you about what's happened in the couple years since you were here last. So let's just kind of kick off with one of the things that I think is interesting that a lot of people may or may not realize that watch our show. So every 10 years we redraw the lines of the Missouri House and Senate districts as well as our congressional districts. We have a census, recount the people, and redraw the districts based upon population.
Right.
The 25th Senatorial District, which is your district, has changed. So tell us how it's changed.
Yeah, well, real quick, I'm representing 8 counties currently, and I'll just tell you it's Shannon, Carter, Stoddard, Butler, Mississippi, New Madrid, Pemscott, and Dunklin.
Okay.
So that's going to change in that I will lose actually Shannon County. I hate losing Shannon County, great county, but I'm going to lose Shannon County, but I'm going to pick up Wayne, Ripley, and Oregon. So instead of representing 8 counties, I will go to 10 counties.
So lots of loss in population in that district over the last 10 years.
Right. Yes. Unfortunate, but the way it was, let's say we lost a lot of population. That's why it's always important to fill out the census stuff, whether you want to or not. It's always important to do that. So.
Absolutely, and a lot of our funding depends upon that too.
Absolutely,
yes.
yes.
So the only redistricting that you really had an opportunity to participate in was redrawing the congressional lines, because my understanding is the House and Senate districts are drawn by a commission that's appointed, and then if they can't make the decision and come to a consensus, they're equally divided among Democrats and Republicans. And if they can't come to a consensus, then a judicial panel is in panel to make the final decision.
Yeah, and just real quick, the House seats were agreed upon by the panel. Everything went through. Senate was not, so it went to a judiciary panel, which it came out pretty quick, and it wasn't any issue. But the U.S. Congressional maps, a little different deal.
Let's talk about how that happens, how that works.
Well, let me start out by saying, first of all, the environment in the Senate was very interesting this year. This is my second year, so your first year you learn a lot, and I learned a lot, still learning a lot. But this year it was a very different environment. You had U.S. congressional maps that we were going to redo, but you also have 17 people that are either running for re-election in the U.S. Senate, or excuse me, Missouri Senate, or they've termed out. You've got somebody new running. I got to write this down because I can't remember all this, but you had 4 senators running for U.S. Congress, 1 running for U.S. Senate. We had 1 senator running for county executive in St. Charles County. So it was a pretty interesting environment. So everybody wants their floor time. They want their, post on Facebook, look what I did, look what I did. So that kind of gets interesting, and it really gets hard to move. You also have another dynamic with the conservative caucus. So there's a group kind of within the Senate. They named themselves the Conservative Caucus, and it's been interesting because there's about 7 senators. Quickly, the makeup of the Missouri Senate is 34 senators, 24 Republican, 10 Democrat. But there's about 7 in the Republican Party that claim to be in the Conservative Caucus. So that makes it interesting of people saying, hey, are you more conservative, not conservative enough, et cetera, et cetera. So very interesting environment this year.
Plus, that gets you down to, if it's just Republicans that don't include the Conservative Caucus, you don't have a majority all of a sudden.
That's right.
You've got 17, which is half. You got to have half plus 1 to move things out of the Senate.
Right.
So yeah, obviously that makes for a very interesting dynamic. When I served in the House, our numbers were really close. When I served as an intern, the numbers weren't nearly as close. And there's a totally different dynamic when the numbers get so close that you're forced to work together.
Right.
And I think that maybe that's what happened with you guys a little bit this year, because of the fact that that your numbers became so close, not close like Democrat, Republican, but not having the majority without the conservative caucus made you have to work across party lines.
Right.
I, in fact, got to spend a little time last week with Senator Rowden and Senator Rizzo, who are the minority and majority leaders of this last Senate. And they're an interesting pair, and they worked pretty well together, and had to, I guess, on a lot of issues. But the Senate's always been that way. It's been a little more collegial than it is partisan.
Right. The Senate's a different body in itself.
Absolutely.
You served in the House, so you know that typically a House bill, you'll spend, I'm going to use this example, you can tell me better, but what, 15 minutes to an hour on a bill, typically?
Just depending on...
Just depending. But in the Senate, we're a slow, deliberative body. So that bill that you all spent, we'll just use the example, 30 minutes on, we may spend 10 hours on that bill and not get to a vote. So it is just a different body, and then when you throw in, like say, the dynamics, absolutely. And there is, I mean, there are certain issues that Republicans are going to be here, Democrats here.
Sure.
That's just fact. And you try to work through those issues and find some compromise to move stuff forward. To me, that's what government's a lot about, is about compromise. And you try to work through that. And so when you kind of throw in this conservative caucus dynamic, it even gets more interesting because, like you said, you kind of got three different parties you're almost dealing with. But you know what? The system prevailed this year. And I know I had a really, really good year by just working through the process like you're supposed to.
And we'll talk about some of those bills that worked through the process for you. One of the things, the reality is that on probably, and folks may not understand this, but on probably 85% of issues that come before the legislature, it's not a partisan issue.
Right.
It's an issue that affects a particular area, or it's, and you can work through those things. It's not it may be an issue that just affects metropolitan St. Louis.
Right.
And that doesn't affect your district or how, and you're able to work with them and help them get their issues done, and they can help you get some of your issues done.
And of interest, kind of a sidebar, that's been my biggest fight in the Missouri Senate is urban versus rural. And getting those urban centers to understand our way of life in rural Missouri.
It's about education too, absolutely, absolutely. So tell us about the congressional redistricting a little bit.
So, right now, the current makeup in Missouri, we have 8 seats, 8 congressional seats, 6 Republican and 2 Democrat. And because of some of the constitutional requirements, CD1 will always tend to be on a Democratic seat.
Right.
And then there's another seat, CD2, in Kansas City. And there's a lot of talk about changing that to where, we have the majority and that we could go to a 7-1 map. Right. Well, I will tell you, my stance all along was I wanted the best possible map for the state of Missouri. Right. We wanted one that truly represented Missouri, because we are a diverse state, urban, rural. And when I really sat back and looked at it and know that the way that we're set up with a 6-2 map, we weren't going to change a whole lot, and it still represented Missouri very well. And if we did go to a 7-1 map, there was a very good chance we'd end up in the courts.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's probably 100% certain that we'd end up in courts. And so we really gained actually a lot to lose if we didn't move forward. And there was a lot of contention in the Missouri Senate by the Conservative Caucus kind of wanting to move towards 7-1 map. And there was a lot of things kind of thrown into it. Everybody wanted to throw it. It was about this, it was about that. Well, no, when you get back and looked at it, the 6-2 map was working for Missouri, represents Missouri very, very well. And pretty much all the people that were in office were, just fine with this 6-2 map. Sure. And so, we brought it up early in session and in the Missouri Senate, and then we actually, it just didn't turn out too well. Spent all night on it and really didn't get anywhere. House passed it early. Senate just, we really fought about it. And so we did not, we were not in a good spot early on. Right. And so we worked through till the end of session. It was actually the last vote we take. Had to use a procedural method to bring it back up, and ended up passing a 6-2 map. That's kind of the best way I can say it without going into a lot of specifics and a lot of behind the scenes meetings and talking about the way, we're in the 8th district, how was the 8th configured and what would work, what would not work.
Sure. Well, and that's another difference in the Senate and the House is the idea of the filibuster. In the House, that's not a possibility. You have a set amount of time that you can individually speak on a bill. You have to speak directly to the bill. You can't talk about anything else, or you're out of order. And that's not the case in the Senate. The Senate can, if you hold the floor, you can hold it for as long as you can hold it, essentially.
And in the House, you may not be recognized to speak.
That's correct.
In the Senate, you're going to get your time.
That's right. Sometimes speakers get a blind eye.
That's right. Well, I will tell you, I actually spent a lot of time on the dais in the Missouri Senate the past 2 years, and I will tell you, everybody gets their chance to speak. That's just how it is.
And that's the way it should be. And of course, when I was there, we didn't have, our numbers were really close again, and so everybody got a chance to speak. We didn't have enough numbers. We were in the majority at the time, the Democrats were, and we didn't have the numbers to be able to say, no, you can't do it, because then they wouldn't show up and help us with anything. So. Okay, let's talk about some of those. You were able to get some bills through that helped the region and maybe agriculture across the state and some other issues. So let's look at a couple of those. How about I know you passed an omnibus agriculture bill.
Yes.
Which, for those of you who don't know, is a bill that encompasses a lot of different issues within the overall heading of agriculture in this particular instance. So tell us about that one.
Yeah, and when we say ag omnibus bills, kind of give you a little bit of an idea, there was a provision in there about logging trucks. There was a provision in there about anhydrous ammonia, ethanol, MASBA tax credits. I mean, just a lot of different things in there. But last year we didn't get that bill passed. It did not pass the Missouri Senate. And the Senate's always a tough place to pass the bill. And so when we came in this year, we had two priorities in our office, and one was the Ag Omnibus Bill, House Bill 1720. And we went to work on it. It had a lot of good provisions in there. I think something that we have now is we've got some tax credits passed for ethanol and biodiesel use.
Okay.
My gosh, gas is a big topic of conversation right now, fuel. So I think this gives our farmers and our retailers here in the state of Missouri definitely an incentive to promote more use of biodiesel and ethanol. And like I say, right now we need foreign dependence on oil. Hey, we can have our own fuel right here grown in Missouri. So I think that was two provisions that were passed that was very, very good. Something else that's kind of near and dear to me a little bit is a Rural Economic Development Committee.
Okay.
And what that's designed to do is really looking at our third-class counties. And this committee will look to identify obstacles and potential needs and priorities for our rural counties. I have a unfortunate distinction. I represent currently 5 of the poorest counties in the state of Missouri. And I'm ready for that distinction I'm ready to move that on.
Absolutely.
So that was a committee that was in there that's going to be formed that will, like I say, there will be equal number of House members and Senate members on there to look to identify needs for our rural counties, third-class counties.
Good, great. That's absolutely wonderful. Just glad to hear that.
Yep.
One of the things you mentioned not being able to pass that last year. One of the things about those omnibus bills is there's almost always one thing in there somebody you can disagree with, and you can say I didn't vote for it because of that. That's what happens when those bills get so big.
Yeah, and to give you an example, the problem with that bill last year and started out with this bill was a rural jobs tax credit.
Okay.
And that sounds really good, promoting rural jobs here in all of our rural counties. It sounds good, but the big hang-up, there was a couple hang-ups for me anyway, but one of them is the way that bill was currently written. I don't know how much it would have really helped counties like Dunklin County or Pembina County. It was more designed for like Cole County, which is Jefferson City, to bring jobs to Jefferson City or to Cole County.
Right.
We need jobs here in Dunklin County and Pembina County. I got to hang up with that. If you're going to do a rural jobs tax credit, make it affect those that need it.
Make it work for all rural
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you, and I've said this all along, tax credits are a slippery slope.
Sure.
As long as they're used correctly, I'm for a tax credit. And I look at those ROIs, those return on investments, and almost all the ones that I certainly support have ROIs of $1 or better.
Okay.
And that's period. And I know the return on investment on this rural jobs program was like 70-some years, and it had a lot of hang-ups. So anyway, that's what held it up last year. It tried to this year. Once again, we made some compromises, and we're able to pass the bill.
Okay, good. Well, good deal. How about I know there was an eminent domain change. I know eminent domain can be a touchy subject, especially for for landowners, and so tell us a little bit about that. I think this one dealt with utility easements. Is that right?
It did. So this was coming out of a project called Grainbelt, which Grainbelt is in the northern part of Missouri. And I had a lot of people say, Senator, why are you messing with something that deals with something in North Missouri? Well, property rights are near and dear to me. It's a very fundamental issue about, every citizen probably in the United States. So, your rights as a property owner. So the Grainbelt Express is what the name of this project is, and it's been going on in North Missouri since, I want to say, like 2015. But anyway, to kind of tell you the problem, a lot of people had a problem, was this Grainbelt Express is a merchant transmission line. It's going to start in Kansas with wind power. It's going to go through the state of Missouri. It's going to go over the East Coast and drop power. Well, here's a couple things. It's a private company owned in Chicago, Illinois. The power source in Kansas hasn't even been built yet. They haven't got access through some states like Illinois and Indiana. So this company out of Chicago, Illinois, has been utilizing eminent domain to go through farmland in Missouri and take possession of that. And there's a lot of problems with that. I mean, I've got land that my grandfather cleared, and I'm pretty protective of that. Sure. And there were just some things that were really not done right. So we've been trying to pass some stuff on eminent domain for actually 8 years. A lot of people have worked hard on it, nothing was passed. So we kind of backed up and said, okay, this Grainbelt Express, it's in North Missouri, it's already going, there's not, even though we might want to, but we're going to have to kind of step back and say, hey, there's other transmission lines coming. What can we do to protect our property rights owner here in the state of Missouri? So long story short, what we said was, if eminent domain is utilized, because remember, it's a last resort. Hopefully you can work with the landowner and work through the whatever the agreement that you make. But if not, and you have to use eminent domain, number one, the value of your land will be at 150%.
Okay.
So if it's worth $1,000 an acre, well, it's $1,500.
Okay.
The other thing that we said was, if it has to go to that, the proceedings to use eminent domain and figure out a value, they will appoint a commission. One person on the commission has to be a farmer from that county of at least 10 years. Okay. Because you and I are born and raised here, and we know that a value of ground right around Malden is one thing, Zenith, Missouri is another thing.
Absolutely.
That's just fact. So somebody on there that has some understanding. Two other things that we said was, one, if you use eminent domain to take the property, and let's say 5-6 years down the road you haven't done anything, that property automatically goes back to the landowner. That's the way it should be. Yeah. End of story. And the last one was, if you're going to come through the state of Missouri with a power line, you got to drop power. I mean, it should be. And that's one thing with Grainbelt, they really weren't dropping any power. Right. And you know what? If you've got more efficient power, you should be able to drop it. Now, we said proportionately, because if you start a line in, let's say, Springfield and end up in Keokuk, Iowa or something, that's across the whole state of Missouri. That you should have to drop a lot of power. If you're just cutting across the Boot Hill, that's not as much power. So those were some things that we said that are fair to property rights, property owners. Like I say, that was a huge bill. It hasn't, it's been in the House for 8 years and nothing's been done. I mean, the Senate's always been the place. So we were able to get that through. And I will just tell you, we started on that in January, working with senators, talking about it, working through compromises. And, the one thing I learned is that when you have an environment like I talked about with a lot of things going on, hey, let people be in the fray and do their things, and then go behind the scenes and get the work done.
And get the work done. Absolutely. No, absolutely. I see that 100%. Now, that was something that really, I mean, it benefits your district in that if someone decides to come through here in the future, but the impetus for it obviously was in a totally different part of the state. Right. But, tell us about some things maybe that happened this year that really benefit our district.
Well, we had Senate Bill 987 that we got through this year. We actually got that through last year on another bill, but that other bill had some problems, not with the particular of our bill. But Senate Bill 987 was to allow casinos let me back up here. I think there was 13 original licensees when they first did casinos here in Missouri. Okay. And they're all on the river. on the Missouri-Mississippi River. This was to allow the existing ones that still weren't off the river to be able to come inland 1,000 feet. So we were specifically talking about the one in Crothersville. And the one in Crothersville, man, it's a, you know, if you really knew all the barge traffic and all the things out there, you wouldn't feel real comfortable on that boat anyway. So we were able to get that bill passed, which is going to allow them to move that facility inland. Now, to tell you how big of a deal this is for Pembina County, that's a $42 million expansion that they're going to do with that casino in Crothersville. Put in a new hotel, new gaming facility, really big deal. So that was a big win. Another one for Pembina County was a soybean crushing facility. Cargill is going to put in. We helped with a little bit of, on the appropriation side, some money for electrical line going there. And that's going to be around a $400 to $450 million processing facility in Pembina County. So if you kind of look at counties, I'll say Pembina County is a big winner this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. Well, that's great. Those are great things to hear. Now, when you were here and talking to Barry after you'd been elected but not yet sworn in, several things you talked about. Obviously, rural economic development was one of those. Workforce development was a huge issue for you and continues to be. And one of the things specifically you talked about was this idea of a workforce training center in the region. You know, maybe, you know, my son went to the State Technical College at Lynn, which is just amazing. That place is continuing to grow, building new buildings and new programs all the time. But you talked about maybe trying to do some kind of workforce training center here in this area, maybe here in Malden. Where are we at with that?
Well, we've been working on that a lot, trying to make something happen. And you know this as well as anybody, government moves slow.
Absolutely.
And you know, when you have an idea, that usually involves a lot of people. So we have been definitely still looking at something here in the Malden, Dunklin County area as a workforce training development center. I will just go ahead and say this. Another big winner this year was the Boys and Girls Club in Poplar Bluff. We were able to appropriate them $2 million for a new facility. And this kind of spurred something in seeing their program and how it works, and that kind of spurred us on to kind of look at possibly looking at bringing Boys and Girls Club to the Boot Heel, potentially, you know, to the Malden area. So we're really looking into that right now. And I'm not saying we really changed, because that's, you know, at the same time that the Boys and Girls Club does a lot of good. And if a child starts that program and completes that program, they're coming out with like 12 hours of college credit to complete that program. And the one in Poplar Bluff offers them a full ride scholarship to either Southwest Missouri or to Three Rivers. So we're kind of looking at that pretty hard and heavy right now. And, you know, we'll just see how it comes. Like I say, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that's got to fit together. And
well, that's interesting. You know, this idea of Boys and Girls Club, you know, Positive Brotherhood does great things here in Malden.
Absolutely.
But they're a local entity, and with you've got the backing of the Boys and Girls Club, that's a much bigger entity, and they can give you more support and give you some, you know, they could expand what they're doing now and could really benefit a lot more young people.
You know, absolutely. And you bring in somebody like the Positive Brotherhood as part of that program.
Absolutely.
I think that would be excellent. And that's kind of what we're looking at. And, you know, there's a facility here in Malden that we've definitely been looking at, and just talking to there's a lot of different things going on between Southeast Missouri and the Chris family and what's going on there. So like I say, it's something that we have, we're still working on.
Still working on. Good, good. No, that's really positive. So, you know, you're not up for election this time. You have a 4-year term, so you've served 2. You're halfway through your term. What are your priorities for the next couple of years?
Well, you know, still workforce development absolutely is a big priority. You know, one thing that, and this is something that we may disagree upon this, but if you look at the surrounding states in the Boot Heel, you've got Kentucky, you've got Tennessee, you've got Arkansas, and they're all, I mean, they're pretty well booming in those states with industry. So still looking heavily at right to work as an option. Now, you know, personally, I think that option has to be county by county, because I think in some counties it works. I think we're at a disadvantage because those other states are right to work states. Kentucky is a county by county right to work state. But I think it's something that we definitely need to look at as an advantage to bringing industry here. We just got to play that out. I think healthcare here in the Boot Heel is extremely important. Kennett still is without a hospital. Hayti, I know, has had its problems. But I think we had a tornado back in December, and I think we saw how important a hospital is. Absolutely. Because there was loss of life in the Boot Heel, and I know the Hayti Hospital was absolutely at peak. They couldn't, and I think that showed definitely how important,
no doubt,
it is. So I think those are some of the priorities that we'll definitely be looking at in the future, and to continue on with that. So.
Good. Well, I think that I love what you've done. I think you've done exceptionally well in a session that, for the most part, at least from the outside looking in, was marred by dissension. But you have done a yeoman's job, as a freshman in the Senate, getting some really good things done for your constituents and for the state of Missouri. So I commend you on what you've accomplished already. Wish you the best of luck moving forward. So thank you to Senator Jason Bean from Missouri's 25th Senatorial District. Thank you for putting yourself in the arena and for joining us on In the Arena. We'll see you next time.